My mother said it in front of 32 people, in the dining room of a house I had paid for, on a Thanksgiving weekend I had driven 14 hours straight just to be part of. She set her wine glass down on the tablecloth I had ordered from a shop in Ottawa the previous Christmas, folded her hands in her lap the way she always did when she had made up her mind about something, and looked straight at me. "The Mounties made you cold, Tatum. You've been away so long you've forgotten what family is. Honestly, I look at you sometimes and I don't recognize my own daughter." 32 people stopped chewing. My cousin's husband set his fork down. My great-aunt in the far corner of the room pretended to examine the centerpiece. My brother, sitting to my mother's left with his third glass of Malbec in hand, stared at the tablecloth. His wife, Odessa, kept her eyes on her plate, a small, satisfied curve at the corner of her mouth that she didn't bother hiding. Something inside me gave way quietly, the way ice buckles in early March. Not a crash, just a soft, terrible shift beneath the weight of it. I am Corporal Tatum Aldridge, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, 11 years in, currently posted to a detachment in northeastern British Columbia where the first snow had already fallen and the October mornings arrived cold and dark before anyone was ready for them. I had accumulated more hours on desolate highways and remote calls than I could count. I had held a stranger's hand while we waited 40 minutes for an ambulance in conditions where the medevac couldn't land. I had knocked on doors in the middle of the night to deliver news that changed people's lives in an instant. I was not by any measure a cold person. But I sat at that table and I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I picked up my water glass, drank, and set it back down slowly. I kept my posture straight the way 11 years of wearing a uniform had made instinctive. And I said very quietly to my mother, "Then from now on, live as if you raised someone who stayed." I pushed back my chair, stood up, and walked to the front closet for my jacket. My brother's voice hit me from across the room before I reached the hallway. "Where do you think you're going? You can't just walk out, and the truck stays here. That truck belongs to this household." I stopped. The truck was a 2021 Ford F-150 registered in my name, insured in my name, purchased with 11 months of my own paychecks, and a lump sum I had been setting aside for 3 years specifically for that purpose. My brother had been driving it for 4 months because, as my mother explained it, he needed reliable transportation for his business, and my truck was just sitting in the driveway while I was posted up north. I turned around and looked at him for a long moment. "It's my truck, Felix," I said. "My name is on the registration." I took the keys off the hook by the front door, my keys, the ones I had left with my mother for safekeeping while I was away, and I walked out. The October air hit my face. The maples in the front yard were full orange, brilliant and cold in the early evening light. I got into the truck, backed out of the driveway of the house I had paid off with a combination of 11 years of bi-weekly transfers and a lump sum payment in the spring of 2022, and I drove. I didn't have a plan. I drove for about 20 minutes, muscle memory taking me toward the expressway, and then pulled into a motel I had stayed at once before. The last time there hadn't been enough oxygen in that house for me and my mother to share. I paid for one night. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the beige wall. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother's number. "Bring the truck back tonight. It lives here. It belongs to this family. If you don't bring it back, I'll report it stolen." I read it twice. I typed back, "Do what you need to." I set the phone face down on the nightstand, lay back on top of the covers, and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. I thought about a night shift 2 winters ago, sitting in my cruiser on a stretch of highway outside Fort St. John at 2 in the morning, watching the northern lights come in low and green over the tree line. I had called my mother from that parking lot, voice message only, because the signal kept dropping, to tell her I had transferred money for the property tax. She texted back 3 days later, "Okay, Felix says he needs new tires too. Can you do another $800 this month?" I thought about the Christmas before that, when I flew home on my own dime, 3-hour flight, $140 cab from Pearson's because nobody offered to pick me up, and arrived to find Odessa redecorating the living room. She had ordered a new sectional, a media unit, and a set of abstract prints for the hallway, all of it on the supplementary card I had put in my mother's name, strictly for groceries and household emergencies. When I mentioned it, my mother said Odessa had very good taste, and that the house had needed updating for years. I thought about how many times I had transferred money before asking any questions, how many times I had told myself that families go through rough patches, that my brother was just getting on his feet, that my mother had worked hard her whole life and deserved stability. I thought about my father, how he had driven a city bus for 24 years and still managed to salt away enough for a modest RRSP and a clean conscience. He died of a stroke when I was 22, 1 month into my first posting. At the funeral, my mother said, in front of me and my brother and the neighbors and everyone, "Felix looks so much like his father. He has your father's spirit." She said it 3 times that afternoon. She did not say it to me once. I was still staring at the water stain when 2 OPP cruisers pulled into the motel parking lot. I saw the lights through the gap in the curtains. I was on my feet before I registered the decision, years of instinct pulling me upright. I opened the door before they knocked. 2 officers young, one with a notepad already out. "Ma'am, are you Tatum Aldridge?" "Corporal Aldridge, RCMP," I said, old habit. "Yes, what can I help you with?" They had received a report of a stolen vehicle, a 2021 Ford F-150, allegedly taken from a private residence. I looked at them for a moment, then I went back inside, opened my bag, and came back with my registration. I handed it over without a word. "That's my truck," I said. "My name is the only name on that registration. My name is the only name on the insurance policy. I purchased it in March of 2021. I'm happy to give you the dealership's number if you'd like to confirm the bill of sale." The younger one read the document, looked up, read it again. The older one cleared his throat. "The reporting party is a Mr. Felix Aldridge. He's claiming the vehicle is a household asset that was removed without consent." "He is incorrect," I said. "I removed my own vehicle from my own property. If a report has been made against me, I'd like to know the full details, because what I'm hearing is that my brother has filed a false report with your detachment." They went back to their cruiser. I stood in the doorway and watched them run the plates. 20 minutes later, the older one came back. "Everything checks out, Corporal. The vehicle is registered solely in your name. We're sorry for the inconvenience. The individual who filed the report may be contacted regarding the filing." After their cruisers pulled out of the lot, I sat back down on the edge of the bed. The fear I expected to feel didn't come. What came instead was something colder and much more useful: clarity. The next morning, I drove to a Tim Hortons and ordered a large dark roast and sat in the corner booth for 3 hours with my laptop and my phone. First call, the RCMP Division's Legal Services Unit. I reached a staff sergeant named Pellerin, who had been with the force's member assistance and legal team for over a decade. He was precise and unsentimental in exactly the way I needed him to be. I told him everything: the false vehicle report, the property I owned outright, the supplementary card charges. He listened without interrupting. "Pull your credit report today," he said, "and check your CRA MyAccount right now before we hang up." I had my login. What I found in my Canada Revenue Agency account took the air out of my lungs in a way that nothing the previous night had managed. There were 2 business registrations linked to my social insurance number that I had never authorized. My brother had used my SIN to register a numbered company in Ontario and had applied, under that registration, for a Canada Emergency Business Account loan through the federal CEBA program. He had received $40,000 in pandemic relief funding. He had made no repayments. My home address, the house I owned in Kitchener, was listed as the business address on the application. My mother had countersigned as a witness. I sat in that Tim Hortons booth with my hands flat on the table and made myself breathe. Pellerin told me to document everything. I screen captured every page in my CRA account and forwarded the file to his secure email. He told me to contact the CRA fraud line, which I did from the parking lot, speaking quietly into my phone while a woman at the next table settled her toddler into a high chair. Then I called TD Bank. The supplementary cards in my mother's name and my brother's name had a combined balance of $31,412. The itemized statement told the story plainly. Amazon, a restaurant in downtown Kitchener I had never been to, a car detailing shop, a furniture consignment where Odessa had sourced pieces for the living room reno, a golf membership deposit, a trip to Cancun in February that neither of them had mentioned to me. I asked the representative to permanently cancel both supplementary cards, effective immediately. "Both cards were declined at a grocery store at 9:47 this morning," she said. That would have been my mother then. I drove from the Tim Hortons to a real estate lawyer on King Street. I showed her the title. She drafted a formal 60-day notice of termination of occupancy, the minimum required under the Ontario Residential Tenancies Act when an owner reclaims a property for personal use. She asked who would be serving it. "I'll deliver it myself," I said. "I want them to have it from my hand." The last thing I did before leaving her office was log into the RCMP Group Benefits portal and update my life insurance and pension beneficiary designations. For 11 years, my mother had been listed as my sole beneficiary. I removed her name and my brother's name and replaced them with the RCMP Foundation, an organization that supports families of fallen officers. If I had been killed on a back road in northern BC, on any of the hundreds of nights I drove those roads alone, the money would have gone to them. It would not go to them now. I pressed submit and felt a weight I had been carrying so long I had stopped noticing it finally lift from the center of my chest. I drove to the house that afternoon. My mother opened the door before I had my hand on the knob. Behind her, my brother stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, wearing a fleece vest I recognized as something I had ordered online and shipped to the house, which he had apparently decided was now his. I could hear Odessa's heels on the kitchen tile somewhere in the back. I stepped inside and handed my mother the eviction notice without preamble. She took it the way people take documents they don't want, pinching the edge between two fingers as though it might burn her. Her eyes jumped from the first line to my face. What is this? A formal notice under the Ontario Residential Tenancies Act. You have 60 days from today to make other arrangements. I am reclaiming the property for personal use. The mortgage was paid off entirely using my service pay. The title has only ever had one name on it. My brother took 3 steps forward, his voice going up the way it always did when he was frightened. You can't do this. We live here. Mom has been here 9 years. 9 years without paying rent, utilities, or property tax, I said, keeping my voice level. 9 years where I covered everything from BC. You owe us. I owe you nothing, Felix. He was still searching for words when I set the second document on the hall table, a printout of everything I had found in my CRA account, the numbered company, the CEBA application, his name, my mother's signature. The color left his face all at once. The CRA fraud line has already been notified, I said. Their investigative unit will be in contact. I have been cooperating with them since this morning as the victim of SIN misuse. I would suggest you speak to a lawyer before their call comes. Odessa appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked at my brother's face, then at the document on the table, and I watched something very precise calculate behind her eyes. I turned around and walked back to my truck. My brother's world came apart, the way borrowed things always do, piece by piece, in front of people he had been trying to impress. The CRA investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, they had frozen the fraudulent business registration and issued a formal demand for repayment of the CEBA loan plus interest and penalties. The total sat at just over $47,000. My brother had spent every cent of it. His personal credit cards hit their limits around the same time. A contractor he had been paying to manage a renovation project he had no legal stake in demanded the deposit back. My brother had no deposit to return. The associates he had been taking out to dinner on my card, men he had told for 3 years that he had a silent investor backing his operations, stopped returning his calls by the 3rd week of October. Odessa left in the 1st week of November. She boxed up her things, loaded her car, and drove away while my brother was out. She left a note on the kitchen counter. I know this because my mother called to tell me, the first time she had called without asking for money in longer than I could remember. Extended family had opinions. An aunt left me a voicemail, calling me a disgrace. My mother's cousin, whom I had met perhaps 4 times in my adult life, sent a lengthy e-message explaining that what I was doing was a sin. I listened to each one once and did not return any of them. I was mid-shift in BC when my personal cell buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. A call routed through my mother's landline, which I was still paying out of habit. It was my brother. He sounded like someone had wrung every drop of certainty out of him and left the rest to dry. His voice was thin, unfamiliar. He said he was sorry. He said he had been stupid. He said he hadn't understood how bad things had gotten until it was already gone. I let him talk until he ran out of things to say. Then I asked him one question, what are you going to do now? He said he didn't know. I told him I would pay the first installment of the CRA repayment penalty. Not the whole thing, not as a gift. $8,000 toward his federal debt, enough to keep the most immediate pressure from becoming criminal charges. In exchange, he would sign a formal repayment agreement to pay me back at $400 a month, drafted by a lawyer and notarized. He would enroll in the Provincial Trades Apprenticeship Program. He would remove his name from my accounts, my SIN, my address, and my life, permanently, in writing. He said yes so quickly I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I spoke to my mother separately. I told her she would need to find a rental. Her CPP and OAS combined covered a modest 1-bedroom in the Kitchener area if she was careful with it. I sent her 3 listings from Kijiji without comment. The 60-day notice stood. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said quietly, I don't have anyone to help me move. I know, I said. I'll hire a moving company. 1 day, 2 movers. That's what I can do. A year later, I drove back to Kitchener for Thanksgiving again. Just me, my truck, and 14 hours of highway. My mother's apartment was on the 4th floor of a building near Victoria Park. It smelled like the potpourri she had kept in a bowl by the door for as long as I could remember. That surprised me. She had a small balcony with 2 folding chairs and a geranium in a terracotta pot that was holding on against the season. The furniture was the same pieces she had moved from the house, worn at the corners, suddenly the right size for a space where one person actually lived. She had made a chicken, nothing elaborate, roasted potatoes, frozen green beans, cooked soft the way she always made them, and I never liked but never said so. My brother came in the afternoon. He drove himself in a used Civic with a scratch along the rear quarter and a faint smell of sawdust. He was doing his first year of an electrical apprenticeship with a company that did commercial installs. He looked tired in a different way than he used to, a real tired, the kind that came from using your body for something that mattered. He did not ask me for anything. He helped my mother with the dishes after dinner, which I was not sure he had done even once in the 9 years he lived under her roof for free. I watched them from the kitchen doorway, the two of them in the cramped galley space, with the late afternoon light coming through the window, and I let myself feel the full, complicated weight of it. Not peace exactly. It was too honest for peace. More like the truth, sitting there undecorated, asking nothing of me. My mother set a cup of tea in front of me without being asked. She didn't apologize. She didn't say she was proud of me. Some things go too deep to surface easily, and I had stopped expecting speeches. But she sat down across from me and wrapped both hands around her own mug and looked at me the way she hadn't in years, without wanting anything from me. That was enough. I had learned the hardest thing I have ever learned, harder than any night shift on an ice-covered back road, harder than any door I have ever knocked on with terrible news waiting on my tongue. Loving someone does not mean funding their avoidance of reality. Sometimes the most honest act of care you can offer the people you love is to refuse, absolutely refuse, to be the reason they never have to change. Stopping the rescue, really stopping it, even when they are standing at your door with nothing, is not cruelty. It is the only thing that actually reaches them. I drove back to BC the next morning. The prairies came up flat and gold on either side of the Trans-Canada, and I kept the radio off for a long stretch, just listening to the sound of my own tires on my own truck on the long, clean road ahead.